Welcome to the NorthLakes podcast. Thank you for listening. My name is Jeremy Oswald, and in this episode, we will be talking to behavioral health therapist Paul Workman about social anxiety, especially in kids. Here we go.
Hey, I'm Paul Workman. I am a behavioral health therapist based out of Minot. I've been with NorthLakes for a little over a year now. My job title is a school-based behavioral health therapist. So what that means is during the school year, I am at school 3 days a week, working with kiddos during the school day. And then the remaining 2 days of the week, I'm here working out at clinics. So while I do see people of all ages, I am predominantly and primarily working with children.
And what age kids do you see at the school, and what school are you in?
So I am seeing kindergarten through 12th grade. So here in Minot, I'm actually 2 days a week at the Northwood School. And that is a K-12 school, so I see kids of all ages there. And then on the remaining school day of the week, I go to the Hayward School, where I am at the intermediate school, which is 3rd through 5th graders, and then the middle school, which is 6th through 8th graders.
Do you have a favorite age? I don't mean to make you biased. I know,
I think there's definitely cool things about working with people of all ages. So working in community mental health, you get to see everybody. So I've experienced working with kids as young as 6 years old up to adults all the way into their 80s. I think that there's definitely something different about every single age group that makes them super cool to work with. I love the little kids because we get to play a lot. And I think because I was a little bit of an angsty teenager too, something about working with teenagers just really, really hits me the right way, and that's a lot of fun too.
Well, and it must be like I'll little full disclosure is when I was in high school, I spent time. I saw a behavioral health therapist. I think we called it a counselor at the time.
Sure,
but it was kind of neat. You kind of hit this sweet spot that you're not a teacher, you're not a parent, and I don't know. You kind of like maybe they open. Well, I guess it's your job for them to open up a little bit more to you. So
yeah. One of the things that I make pretty clear right away, especially with the teenagers that I see at the school, is that I don't work for the school. I work for NorthLakes. The school is awesome enough to bring me in. But in terms of disciplinary stuff, all those things considered with the school, that's not my job. That's not my role. And I think that definitely helps.
Nice. So I could talk to you, I think, all day about talking about school-based behavioral health, but we wanted to talk something a little bit more specific today, and that was social anxiety.
Yeah.
And let's just start out with, what is social anxiety?
So there's a couple of things we could be talking about when we're talking about social anxiety. And you see this a lot where people will refer to things pretty colloquially. So social anxiety, just don't like being around people. I get nervous around people, don't want to do that. However, when we're talking about a social anxiety disorder, we are talking about something very, very specific. And the DSM-5, which is kind of the guide to all mental health disorders, delineates pretty clearly what social anxiety disorder looks like and how it plays out. So in order for it to be a diagnosable social anxiety disorder, there have to be a few things present. One of those things is that a fear of social situations where there's a chance of being exposed to scrutiny by others. So that could be any kind of social interaction, being observed, or even performing, so public speaking or doing a music recital. They also have to fear that they're going to act in a way or show anxiety symptoms that will be negatively evaluated by those around them. Social anxieties almost always have to provoke anxiety, so it's not something that is just happening one time. It has to be something that's a little bit more encompassing than that. And the way that they respond to it is either through avoidance, or they have to endure the situation with intense fear or anxiety. Another component of a social anxiety disorder diagnosis is that the fear or anxiety is out of proportion to the actual threat posed. It has to be persistent, so it has to be going on for more than 6 months. Additionally, like most mental health disorders that we diagnose, the fear, anxiety, or avoidance has to cause clinical significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or otherwise important areas of functioning. So that's just a fancy way of saying that it has to interfere with your life and make it hard for you to do the things that you need to be doing. So for a third grader, their job right now is to be a student. Their job right now is to be a friend. And if their anxiety is presenting in such a way that it significantly impairs their ability to do do so, then we might be moving more towards the direction of a formal social anxiety disorder diagnosis. However, you can certainly see different traits of social anxiety that come up. So I think when we talk about social anxiety, in a lot of ways, we could either be talking about the specific disorder with the diagnostic criteria or traits that are often associated with the disorder. Additionally, for a diagnosis of social anxiety disorder, the symptoms cannot be attributable to the physiological effects of a substance or another medical condition. And it can't be better explained by the symptoms of another mental health disorder. So like a panic disorder, a body dysmorphic disorder, an autism spectrum disorder. So that's kind of like from a provider level, how we rule out to see, okay, are we talking about social anxiety generally, or are we talking about social anxiety disorder specifically?
And can it be like for specific situations? Like, I don't like recess because XYZ. Like, I'm fine everywhere else. Or, like you mentioned performance. Like,
sure.
Have been somebody that's been on the stage. That's terrible. Like that first half hour before the doors have opened and you're waiting to go on. It's the worst feeling in the world. But I don't ever have that feeling anywhere else. And I'm not trying to make this about me, but is it specific to certain situations, or do you need to kind of see it like in several spots where you're like, wow, let's work with this?
So typically what we'd be looking at, again, is a significant impairment. I think getting a little bit nervous before you have to speak publicly or nervous before you have to do a recital, these are totally normal human experiences. Very few people can go up there. Maybe it's the extroverts in the world, maybe, but very few people can go out there and perform in certain ways that don't have any kind of anxiety associated to it. So this might be a good time to clarify that anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing. That anxiety a lot of the time is a very useful thing to have. But when we talk about disordered anxiety, we're talking about anxiety, again, that is out of proportion to the severity of what actually might happen, that's persistent and also interferes with functioning. So if I get anxious about paying my power bill on time, this is a totally normal thing because I need my power bill for my house to work properly. I need my power bill for all these things. So having a little bit of anxiety can help motivate us, can help us live the kinds of lives that we want. But when we're talking about clinical impairment, we're talking about extremes that lead to people not being able to do the things that they need to do.
And it's so bad they can't eat, they can't sleep, they're not able to.
In some cases, in a lot of other cases, especially when it comes to seeing it in the classroom or seeing it at school, I think we're talking about children primarily here. Difficulty focusing on the content that's being presented, difficulty interacting with their peers, fear of being negatively apprised by their peers, fear of being judged. So a lot of that can get in the way of their ability to function in the classroom, their ability to participate as students, and in some cases, too, their ability to participate as friends. One of the interesting things, too, about the social anxiety diagnosis is that when it is diagnosed in children, you also have to see it apply to peer relationships, too. So it can't be with just adults.
So they're having troubles with the other kids in the class. Or
sure.
Not troubles.
Not necessarily troubles, but fear of how the other kids in the class will view them.
Sure. And so is there a typical kind of kid that this affects, or who does it affect?
So I was actually researching this before we came up to meet here. And one of the interesting things I found out is that it can affect basically everybody, but the prevalence rates in children under the age of 12 are pretty low. Typically, you start to see it peaking out more during adolescence. You alluded to your time in high school. I think high school is a pretty rough time for everybody. And that's when a lot of those things can appear. Interaction with other students, interaction with staff, fears of anxiety. So yeah, while you can see it in younger kids, typically it starts to appear more into adolescence.
And so it's something you see it a lot in the school.
I see social anxiety traits for sure.
Okay.
Like we talked about the distinction between the specific disorder versus some of those traits.
Got it. So if you're experiencing this, what are some behaviors can it bring about? Are there is it, I don't know, is that a simple enough question? Or?
Sure. No, that's a good question. And I think it's interesting that you went on behaviors, because when we talk about how social anxiety presents, we're really looking at three different realms primarily. So behaviors are for sure one of them, like you mentioned, but we're also looking at physiological presentations and then cognitive presentations. So we can just go through them really quickly here. So the physiological presentation would be body feelings, the way it feels in your body. So when you see social anxiety disorder or traits in children, a lot of times it presents physiologically. So talking about autonomic arousal in social situations. So heart rate is increasing, heart's beating faster, there's sweating, there's flushing, there's nausea, abdominal problems, muscle tension. So this is a physiological realm that social anxiety can manifest itself. And then behavior, like you were talking about, you see it a lot of the time as avoidance behaviors or irritability, angry outbursts, crying, clinginess to the parents, or overcautiousness. And then cognitively, one of the realms where social anxiety will also manifest is they may have concerns about social evaluation, and they're likely to interpret social situations in a more threatening manner. So kind of this trifecta, these three different realms of physiological, behavioral, and cognitive are all different ways in which social anxiety can present itself.
And so what causes it? Do you know, like why, you said it could affect anybody, that, it's usually after 12, but any idea, what brings it about?
So that's a really, really tough, complicated question, especially when you're talking about the etiology of mental health disorders. So what brings them about? Where do they come from? And
I figured you were the one to ask.
Well, it is very complicated. So for one, we can't study specifically what a causal relationship looks like, because that's super unethical, because we'd be going out and giving children or trying to give children social anxiety disorder on purpose. And that's a huge no-no, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times we just have to look at studies and research to see kind of what different components can be in place where we can have predictors, or what things are typically associated with social anxiety, so we can kind of see what's going on. And a lot of the things that are in place are genetic components, or like a family component. So we know with most anxiety disorders that if other people in your family have it, you're more likely to have it. So there's definitely a genetic component, but there's a huge environmental component as well. So a way that I like to look at it is that a lot of the time people can have a quote unquote genetic predisposition for things, but the environment exists and turns those genes on or turns those things on. So just because you may have a family history of a disorder doesn't mean that you are for sure going to get it. And just because you don't have a family history of a disorder doesn't mean that you won't get it either. So there's certainly some stuff at play with the environmental stuff or the environmental concerns. Children who get bullied have higher levels of social anxiety disorder, or if they get teased. And that's, I think, a pretty understandable thing, right? So if it is about fear of negative evaluation from other people, if you are constantly being teased by your peers, you're going to start to realize that there might be something to be afraid of, or there might be something to be anxious about.
Yeah, that's a pretty real thing. I mean,
yeah. And then on top of that, you can add just basic temperament as well. Children who are typically more shy will also lean more in that direction, or higher behavioral inhibition, more kind of closed in, quieter kids could lead to this. Now, whether or not it's a causal factor, we can't say specifically, but just looking at some of the other correlations in place to see what these predictors might be.
Mm-hmm. And this is just, somebody must have liked high school. But I mean, what our school, I guess I don't know.
I remember when I was in high school, there were some people out there who would be like, Paul, you better You better enjoy this while you have it, because high school is going to be the best time of your life. And I remember thinking to myself, oh boy, I sure hope not.
Goes downhill from here, huh? But like, it's, is there something unique or different that about people that are in school that this makes it a little more, is it different in kids than it is in adults? Like, I guess I'm like, how being in school, we've all gone through it, how's it a little different than maybe like an adult would be experiencing it?
So a lot of the adults who come in and discuss issues related to social anxiety, they'll often say, boy, I feel like I've been this way my whole life, or I feel like this has been something that's been going on my entire life. The way it presents to children in school can be very different as well. With the younger kids who aren't as connected with their internal world, say as like an adolescent or something like that, you're going to see a lot more of the physiological symptoms, a lot more of the body symptoms. They might not be able to articulate, I'm afraid that they're going to think bad things about me. It may present itself as, if I have to do this, I suddenly get a tummy ache, or I don't want to do it. And you're going to see some of the avoidance playing out differently in younger children. So more in the form of crying, temper tantrums, more, I guess, age appropriate or age expected responses. Once people start getting older into adolescence, they're able to articulate a lot of that stuff better. And that's when you start seeing a lot more of the expressions of worrying about how other people are going to feel about you. With that being said, developmentally too, when you're an adolescent, one of the most important things is fitting in. So, I mean, I guess it would make sense that you would start to see some of these presentations happening in adolescence a little bit differently, because an adolescent's job is to go to school and all this kind of thing. But an adolescent's job is also to learn how to fit in and to learn how to kind of get along with the crowd and do, all those kinds of things that adolescents have to do. So I think in different stages of life, you see it presenting a little bit differently, but the core underlying thing is other people are going to look at me, other people are going to think blank about me, and I don't like the way that feels. So I'm either going to figure out ways to prevent that from happening, or I'm going to avoid it altogether.
And so how are you able to treat this? How do you help these school-age kids out when they come to you?
Sure. So the research says that that CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is the frontline intervention for how to treat social anxiety disorder. And really, there's something called like an anxiety circle or an anxiety loop. And basically how it works is you are exposed to an anxiety-provoking situation. So you start to feel these feelings of anxiety. You start to feel the body things right away. So the upset tummy, the nausea, the increased heart rate, the flushing skin, all that kind of stuff. You start to feel these physical sensations right away. And that immediately keys your body and says that you need to be on alert and you need to be looking out for threats. You need to be figuring out what's going on and you need to attend to that. So then what ends up happening is you engage in things to get short-term relief. So a lot of the time that can be avoidance from the anxiety-provoking situation. And you do get that short-term relief, right? So if you're scared of public speaking, or if you're scared of performing a piano recital, or if you're scared of going on a podcast for your job, you can avoid it, right? And then you get that relief and it doesn't hit you. But then there's the long-term consequences of it. So you get the short-term relief, but then there's the long-term consequences. And a lot of those consequences are difficult because, or can pose problems, as I guess consequences do. It reinforces the avoidance. It reinforces whatever compensation that you were using, and makes you more likely to do it in the future. So if every time you had to do public speaking, you called in sick or you found an excuse not to do it, you would get relief from the anxiety, but there would be the long-term consequences of not doing what you need to be doing. Sorry, I was just kind of explaining that model to start talking about interventions. So when it comes to helping out kids, the big things to do are some social skills training. So how do you talk to people? How do you have interactions with people? And of course, this is all dependent on how the social anxiety disorder or the social anxiety presents itself. But a lot of times practicing in session, how do you make friends? How do you talk to people? How do you introduce yourself? How do you ask to be included? How do you include others? How do you do the basic things in order to do what you need to do? Another thing that is very helpful is called graduated exposure. So really what that is retraining that loop that I just talked about. So it is finding things that provoke anxiety, but not too much, but also not too little, because it needs to be enough to reprogram what you're doing so that those long-term lessons get learned differently. So an example of that would be if you are a kiddo and you're having trouble interacting with peers at recess and you're afraid that people are going to make fun of you or laugh at you. We're not going to start off by practicing the introducing yourself and, hey, do you want to play this? Because that's a big anxiety provoking situation. That's really big. So we may start off smaller with, okay, you need to say goodbye at the end of the day to 2 of the people in your classroom, and you start practicing small. And what that teaches you is that, hey, I can do something that causes that would normally cause me anxiety. I can overcome this, and I can get relief from the anxiety, not by avoiding saying goodbye, but I can get relief from the anxiety by saying goodbye. And then the long-term lesson is, hey, it's actually okay to say goodbye to people. So you start small baby steps, ladders, and eventually you can move up to, more difficult things. But again, somebody with social anxiety, you're not going to say, okay, your homework for this week is to go out and give a speech to 300 people. Yeah, right.
Hope you do okay.
That's not going to fly. Mm-hmm. That's not going to fly at all. So again, you have to start it small and move your way up there, baby steps to help retrain that cycle. And help your body and your brain understand that, yeah, while this is a little bit scary, while this could induce some of those feelings, it's going to be safe and it's going to be okay to do. So again, baby steps leading up to that. Another good treatment option is something called cognitive restructuring, which is basically changing the way that you think about stuff. So a lot of times when we were talking earlier about the 3 different realms in which social anxiety shows itself, we talked about the cognitive stuff. So the cognitive portion is, if I am in this situation, then X, Y, and Z are going to happen. And this is really, really, really bad. And this is why I need to avoid the situation. So the cognitive restructuring is being like, okay, are X, Y, and Z really going to happen? What are the probabilities of X, Y, and Z happening? What would it look like? What are the other options that could happen? What are ways that we can avoid going to this automatic catastrophic thinking? Because that automatic catastrophic thinking automatically fuels anxiety, because you and I aren't scared of going in front of 300 people and speaking because we think that 2 people are going to think we look silly. We're scared of doing it in front of 300 people because we think that all 300 of them are going to think we're an idiot and that they hate us. So again, it is challenging those extremes. Yeah, some people might think that I'm goofy up there, but that's okay.
But what about the other people that are going to love it?
Exactly. See, hey, you can do this too. Mm-hmm. A little bit of cognitive restructuring on your own.
And I'll just say, Paul, you're doing a great job at this podcast.
Well, hey, thank you.
I'm having a really good time, and I'm glad you're here.
I'm enjoying myself too.
Okay, good.
And then another way we can help treat social anxiety is in children is going to, I guess adults too, going to that physiological component. So figuring out that autonomic nervous system activation. So that increased heart rate, that flushing skin, that upset tummy, all these things are natural systems that exist in our body to protect us, right? So our heart needs to push blood faster through our veins to make sure our muscles are strong enough and activated enough to fight things off, because this is what our body is programmed to do in the presence of a threat. So there can be a lot of training for mindfulness or different ways to calm down your body to bring your body out of that elevated physiological state, because that elevated physiological state can affect the way you think about the anxiety too. Because if you might like this. Have you ever woken up from a nightmare and you're sitting in bed and you're still super tense and you're still super frightened and you're sitting in bed. Yeah, you're nodding. Good.
Yeah. Yes, that has happened to me. Yes.
Okay. And you're sitting in bed and you feel profoundly uneasy in bed. And you can sit there and you can be like, wow, this was a dream. This was a wild dream that was crazy. And even though intellectually, cognitively, you know that what you just experienced was a crazy dream that isn't actually happening, your body doesn't. Your body's still got all those stress hormones going through it. Your body is still activated. Your body is still agitated. So even though intellectually, even though cognitively, you can be like, there is no threat, your body's going to be like, whoa. Wait a second, though. I'm activated right now. There has to be a reason why. So treating some of the physiological symptoms of anxiety too can be really, really, really helpful because, you can't just talk your way out of everything. It's about bringing your body down too, because when your body feels good, your brain's going to be able to follow.
So you need to, so how do you do that? Like, do you just you said mindfulness, that was one thing.
Yeah, mindfulness, a lot of intentionality, slowing down, deep breathing is a really good one. One of the things I like to do with kids, especially because kids aren't super excited about sitting in a chair and slowly breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it, slowly breathing out for 4 seconds. That's not something they want to do. So what I found works really well with kids is bubbles.
Yeah.
Bubbles. Yeah. Uh-huh. Remember, you got the little plastic wand and you blow the bubbles out.
I have some right here. No.
But what you can do is turn it into a game. How big of a bubble can you blow right now? And what are a few things you need to do in order to blow a big bubble? You need to slow down. You need to have a lot of air in your lungs to fill up the bubble, and you have to exhale slowly. If you blow out into the bubble too fast, it's going to pop. So you have to have just the right rate of breathing to fill up the bubble. So
I love that. That's just and then even if you don't have the bubbles with you, you can be thinking about how you would do it.
Oh, exactly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, that's a really great way to do it too, to help slow down, help calm the body. Another thing is progressive muscle relaxation, which is really going through different muscle groups in your body, from your toes all the way up to your temples, and flexing and holding those different muscle groups at once as tight as you can, and then letting it relax. And this can help you calm down. This can help your body feel like it's less in that threat state. And then another good thing too is just grounding exercises too. So where am I right now? I like to do a 5 senses, 5 things. So engaging with your 5 senses and finding a few things for each sense in the room that you didn't notice before. And this can really force you to get out of your head, get out of that agitated, get out of that activated state, and be more in the present. And the present, at least I hope so, in the therapy room is a safe space. So bringing your body back into a safer room, a safer area, a safer space. And those are all different ways you can physiologically address those symptoms of anxiety.
Oh, wow. I feel better already. Just even having you, the bubble thing. I'm keeping that one. And this is an even deeper question, Paul, and you can tell me that's for another podcast, but the kids don't walk into your room with a sign that says, "Hi, I have social anxiety." Right. But I'm just and you don't necessarily need to explain it, or maybe there's an easy way to, but I'm just admiring, wow, how did they figure that out? Your job to try and determine what is troubling children, that must be an interesting challenge.
Yeah. And I think that with children especially, it's different because, in doing a diagnostic assessment and doing an interview, you're talking to, the presenting patient, the client, about what their experiences are in their life. But with children especially, it's parents bringing them in and saying, this is what I'm seeing. This is what's going on here. This is what's wrong. And a lot of times the kid will have, especially as they get older, the kid will have their own interpretation of things. And, there's reports from teachers, the school guidance counselor, and collecting all different kinds of collateral information to help kind of put together a picture of what's going on in the kiddo's life. And, the purpose of diagnosing, specifically is to inform the treatment, because, the better idea of what you have going on in front of you, the better idea of what you know what you do. If you're lost in the woods and you have a map, the first thing you want to do is figure out where you are. And then once you figure out where you are, then you need to know, then you can know where to go. But until you know where you are, you don't know exactly what to do. And you can get all kinds of good information from the kids and the parents and the teachers and all that kind of stuff.
And is that? You kind of just listed a few ways that you might come in contact with a student, a kid, a client. Mm-hmm. Is that how it usually happens? That you must work closely with the school. They know that you're there. And then how does a kid end up in your room?
Yeah. Okay. So we are a clinic. So we are a medical provider. I am a service provider here at the clinic. So we do have a formal referral process. And there are many different ways to get to me. It doesn't always have to be the same way every time. But typically it'll either be parents bringing in their kids to see me at the clinic. And then we're like, oh, hey, I'm at such and such a school. Why don't you see me there? Or quite often what'll happen too is working with the staff at the school. Shout out to my guidance counselors at the schools I'm at. You guys are awesome. They'll give me referrals. So they'll have a student that's been on their radar. Typically, by the time they get to meeting with me, they've gone through a lot of other options at the school. And the school guidance counselor or staff there have said, hey, maybe counseling would be a good thing for this kid. So I'll get a referral form from the school, and then the clinic will reach out to the parents and we'll get the ball moving.
Got it. All right. So back to our topic at hand.
Sure.
So a couple things, like what can it do to a kid's overall health? And you maybe tie it in with what if it goes untreated?
Sure.
I don't know if that's the same thing, but if they, and I'm guessing, because it sounds like when you see somebody that's an adult, they're like, I've had this my whole life. They just didn't have someone like you when they were in school. Sure.
So there are high rates of comorbidities with depression. So people with social anxiety disorder are also likely to feel depressed, feeling anxious all the time, being activated all the time, having that autonomic nervous system pumped up all the time is not good for you. Every time that I go to the doctor, they tell me I need to work on figuring out ways to be less stressed out. So I can imagine that people with high levels of anxiety will also have some of those health issues associated with it. Also, what's really interesting, probably more tragic than interesting, is that people who have social anxiety in adolescence and childhood, if it goes untreated, often have higher rates of anxiety as adults, have higher rates of substance use disorders, because again, that's that anxiety cycle that we talked about, where you get the anxiety provoking stimulus, you have the compensation to avoid the anxiety, you get that short-term relief, but then there's the longer-term consequences. These can play out in a lot of different ways. And I see a lot of it playing out in avoidance behaviors. So not engaging with the world in the way that they might, otherwise like to.
And any other, you just listed a couple, but there are any other conditions that are common that accompany social anxiety disorder?
No, just primarily the ones I talked about.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I figured. So what, and have you seen a change? Like, what did the pandemic do? Was it like, is there an AC or a BCAD with that? Was it much better, or have you seen more since the pandemic, or no association at all? So
the pandemic has made the prevalence of mental health disorders and symptoms increase quite a bit. A lot of isolation, a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. And again, doing this, not being as connected with other people, of course, is going to lead to problems. I was reading a study, I think out of Australia, and this is social anxiety in adults. their rates of social anxiety disorder increased pretty significantly over the last 3 years. Now, whether or not we can say the pandemic caused this or that this upward trend happened around the same time as the pandemic, who's to know for sure? I think maybe we'll see some more research about how that played out later on. Because again, this is still pretty recent, but anecdotally, I know that being isolated, living in fear, living in uncertainty certainly has exacerbated and aggravated a lot of mental health issues and conditions in people.
Well, I mean, without I'm an adult, so I'm pretty set in my life. But if you're a whatever age kid, and there were those 2 or 3 years that you missed out on social interaction, I mean, a lot of it is learned, right? I mean, you learn it. So if you didn't have it, and then all of a sudden you're back in it, it's it's got to be a little shock to the system, I would think.
Yeah. And, one of the major benefits of school is being able to be around kids your age. So learning how to interact with people, learning how to talk to people, learning how to negotiate all different kinds of situations. And don't get me wrong, academics are important too. But this is one of the big benefits. This is one of the big benefits.
And the learning.
Yes, the learning. The learning too. Yeah. Yes, I guess. But being able to be a student and interact with your peers. And if all of a sudden that kind of stuff shuts off or changes how it presents, you're going to have problems or you're going to have difficulties at the very least. And, anecdotally, I've seen, some kind of stuff related to that for sure.
And in your opinion, is I think the way, so full disclosure, Paul and I worked on some of these questions before the podcast, and I'll just read, this is number 16. Are our digital lives a factor? How?
Oh boy. You get me going for a while.
Okay.
Of course they are. Of course they are. So when we're talking about social anxiety, the primary thing is that fear of negative evaluation from other people. So when we're looking at social media, a good amount of social media is about fishing for those positive reactions from people. It's about fishing for likes. It's about fishing for shares. It's about, in a lot of ways, presenting your life in an accurate-ish way, but presenting the best part of your life, presenting your highlight reel to the world. I'm here on this earth 24 hours a day, and I don't really post on social media. But, if I did, you'd be getting 30-second increments of the best parts of those 24 hours typically. And I think that social media can lead to issues related to self-esteem, especially in teenagers. Most little kids aren't on social media. I guess most social media platforms do have in their EULA that you need to be 13 or older to use them too anyway. So let's just talk about adolescence here. People present an idealized version or an idyllic version of what their life looks like or what they think it should look like. And when you are constantly surrounded by this in your peer group or whoever you happen to be connected on social media, you can get stuck in this idea of, well, I don't know if I really measure up to that. Because you're there for 24 hours of your life and you get to see all the warty parts of your life, all the unfun parts of your life that typically aren't presented on social media. So I think that social media can have an amplifying effect in the way that it unfairly or maybe disproportionately represents some of the good things. Because most of the time people are going on social media and trying to show the good stuff. Probably more so than the bad stuff and the struggles. And I should say that I am painting with a pretty wide brush here, and that there are people that for sure engage with social media, with honesty and sincerity. But in a lot of ways too, you can see some of these, unfair representations, let's say, or inaccurate. I know that in meeting with a lot of adolescents, for sure, Snapchat, parts of Snapchat can be difficult for them to navigate because you've got your Snap score, which keeps track of how many people you're messaging, how many people you're engaging with. And that's always kind of this number that goes there. You've got Snapchat streaks that you have to maintain with people. They have it built into this thing where they let you know who you're messaging the most. And then it also tells you whether or not they're messaging you the most. So there can be.
I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. Uh-huh.
So you can.
So it's a contest.
Kind of like a contest, but you can also, you can have situations where you might be really, really excited about messaging somebody and then finding out that you're messaging them the most, but they're not messaging you the most. And then it can feel like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? What's going on?
Oh man.
So while Snapchat is super cool to connect with people and, Snap stories can be fun and everybody can have a good time, there's certainly things that are anxiety provoking. One of the common themes that comes up with a lot of teenagers I work with is the being left undelivered or being left unread, where you send a message to somebody and then they either read it and don't respond, or it just sits unread in their inbox until they decide that they want to read it. And of course, because of some of that catastrophic thinking you and I were talking about earlier, it's not, this person that I messaged didn't respond because they were out to dinner with their family and they didn't want to pull out their phone. It is, they didn't respond because they hate me.
Right. Well, and then I'm like, if you're at school and you're doing it at school, you're like, then you see that person, and you're like, well, I don't want to talk to them until they read my message. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there can be there can be a lot of ways, for stress and anxiety to play out. And I don't know necessarily if Snapchat itself is causing this. I think that it certainly presents new ways for people to feel anxious. Let's say I know new ways to feel like when I was in high school, and here I am, a millennial. We, had our family computer or whatever, and I used AOL Instant Messenger to talk to my friends after school and in the evenings. And I could only connect to my computer when the phone line was free to connect to the computer. And I would be talking to them. And if I was available to respond, I would have my AOL Instant Messenger profile up. And as soon as I logged off, I disappeared. So this was kind of the extent of my engagement with technology back, 20 years ago now. Ooh. And things
Let's not make this a contest.
Things have changed a lot since then, because while certainly my generation growing up, we had, quicker ways of accessing each other than the generation before. The generation now is there's a little device that lives in our pocket where we have 24/7 access to people. And that can bring up a lot of new things to be anxious about. If I called one of my friends on the landline phone back when I was in middle school, and, I left a message with their mom to have them please call me back. If I didn't hear back from them for a day or two, that was normal because, they're busy. They got to wait for the phone to be free, blah, 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 blah. No big deal. It happens. Nowadays you send a message and you don't get a reply back in 20 minutes, a half hour. Those gears start turning and it's like, oh my God, what did I do wrong?
Did they get it? Why aren't they writing me back?
Exactly,
what's going on?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it just kind of has amplified the cycle.
Sure. Yeah, it can make it gives, I think it gives people new ways, like I said, to present ourselves. And, I think now we're getting more towards the realm of just general anxiety, more so than social anxiety necessarily. But one of the things I'm seeing too is that there are a lot of apps out there that you can use on your phone to change your appearance, to change the way you look. And I'm not talking about those crazy ones that turn into a dog or a lizard or something, but the ones that have the subtle changes, the minor changes, the face touch up, right? So we're going to smooth out the skin a little bit. We're going to get rid of these blemishes. And then suddenly everybody's using this. It's not announcing who's using this. Everybody's got perfectly smooth, blemish-free skin. Why don't I? What's wrong with me? Which I think can lead to problems. Of course, this is combated by seeing people in real life, in person too. But, social media, I think kids are living a lot of a huge chunk of their lives on it.
Oh, right. Well, and like, I'm afraid to go out in the world because I changed my appearance the way I look here, and I don't really look that way. So I don't want to go out in the world.
You're good at inventing new problems, aren't you?
Sorry, I don't mean to. I'm just like the wheels are turning here, Paul. So
yeah. The way that I can present myself, I have a little bit more control over that on social media than I necessarily would in public.
Huh. Okay. It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, like in so many ways, this digital age, like we don't really know like a lot of these long-term effects yet.
Right. And I don't want to throw out a huge indictment necessarily against social media at all, right? I think I'm going to try to be as agnostic or morally neutral about it as I can, because, there are certainly benefits to this crazy amount of technology. Like now we're shifting into an age of where the skill isn't going to be what the new skill is going to be able to how to quickly find out what you should know, how to access technology, how to access information. It's not necessarily about the information itself, but how to get there. I'm seeing that now. Stuff going around in my house that I need to work on, need to fix. I don't have to dig around and find the Reader's Digest Homeowner's Guide from 1989 to figure out how to do it. I can go on YouTube and cycle through half a dozen videos until I find one that looks close enough to the problem I'm having and watch some nice person explain to me how to fix my problem. It's crazy. It's awesome.
I fixed the starter in my car.
No kidding.
I replaced it. And I was like, without YouTube, it never would have happened.
Awesome.
So hopefully we all have those stories.
Yeah. And there's definitely good stuff here.
Yeah. We could talk this could be a whole nother podcast about so I'm just going to move on a little bit, but that's unless there's anything else about that.
Go ahead.
So my other thing, how can parents, maybe recognize it? Are there things that parents can do to help their kids with it?
Sure. So when it comes to recognizing it for those younger kids, usually about 12 or younger, like I said before, typically of those three realms I talked about where it's going to show itself, it's going to see you're going to mostly see the child complaining about physiological issues. So like the somatic complaints about how they're feeling in their body. I don't want to do this. I have a tummy ache. It feels bad. And then you couple that with a lot of the avoidance stuff. So refusing to participate, refusing to go, dragging their feet, kicking it.
I don't want to go to school today. I'm not really feeling well.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That could certainly be describing what we're talking about. It could also be describing a bunch of other things too.
Sure.
But and a lot of times when parents are coming and talking about stuff like this, the way it parses out in their day-to-day life. So if you've got a kid who's constantly complaining about a tummy ache, constantly not wanting to do things, a way that somebody could read this, especially after being frustrated and worn down, is I'm bringing my kid in because they're always making up being sick about stuff and they don't want to do anything. And I'm bringing my kid in because they are being naughty. And that's not necessarily the case. Right. What may look like naughtiness, what may look like obstinate behavior is, in fact, that avoidance behavior to try to bring around that short-term relief from anxiety. So a lot of times, it's important to stress the idea that, okay, what you may be seeing in your kid is frustrating. It may feel like defiance. It may feel like disrespect, but the kid is using the best language tools that they have and the best tools that they have available to try to solve the problem, which is wanting to try to bring on that short-term comfort. So again, the purpose of counseling, the purpose of therapy is to help, number one, figure out what's going on. So look in the woods, see where we are on the map, where to go, and then figure out better ways of handling these distressing or anxiety-provoking situations that don't necessarily have, those troublesome long-term consequences. So in terms of, with the younger kids, look out for those temper tantrums, look out for that, my tummy hurts, I don't want to do this. With older kids, teenagers, a lot of withdrawn behavior, a lot of isolation, a lot of kind of slow one-word answers, not necessarily wanting to engage with conversations about it. Because again, if one of the hallmarks of social anxiety is fear of people viewing you poorly, if you start suddenly saying, hey, I'm really scared of everything, or I'm really scared of going to school, I'm really there's that risk that the person you're sharing it with might judge you or might look upon you poorly. So it can be difficult to suss out necessarily what's going on right away, because in this case, a lot of the symptoms can be treatment interfering.
And this is just so, I love all this. So are there, what's it like in the school? Do they, does the school do anything to help with this?
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't mean individual, like, I don't think that you go and say like, hey, student X is doing this. That's not what I mean. But in general,
right.
Our schools,
one of the things that I've seen a lot of, and this isn't something that I had in high school. So like live presentations for the class. So you're going to put together a PowerPoint, you're going to put together whatever, present the topic to your class. Something that I've seen a handful of teachers doing, which I think is awesome, is they give the students or the students groups options of either presenting live or recording it. And then showing a video to the class. This is great. I think this is super cool. This allows kids to share the information without necessarily being on the spot. One of the ways that I've seen kind of an example, and I don't remember, when you were in school, did you guys ever do popcorn reading? Where you'd have like a passage from the book that you needed to read, and it would go, person A reads one paragraph, and then they move next in line to the next person to read the second paragraph out loud, and then the third paragraph out loud. Did you ever do that in your classroom?
No, I volunteered. They were like, would anyone like to read? And then I can remember one teacher saying like, it might be easier to understand if you didn't do the voice.
Well, clear memory. I've had some kids reporting that like they will see the impending line of it's going to be my turn in 3 paragraphs, and they will go ahead in the reading, and they will find the paragraph that they need to read. And because they don't want to mess up any words, because they don't want to be surprised, because they don't want to screw up how it's coming out, they will be reviewing their paragraph ahead of time while the other kids ahead of them are reading theirs out loud. So what ends up happening is that the kid who was reviewing their paragraph, who was really anxious, really nervous about sharing this in class or, being called on to read, they're not paying attention to the other paragraphs being read before theirs. They're only making sure that they can avoid surprises, that they can help get that short-term anxiety relief. And again, the long-term consequence of this is they don't know the material that was ahead of them. So I've seen a lot of like the popcorn reading disappearing in classrooms, which is really good. Being called on the spot can be really, really harmful or difficult for kids with anxiety. Another thing is group projects. Picking a group versus being assigned a group. A student with a lot of social anxiety, if they're being told that they have to pick a group, they're going to, nope, not want to do that. You're shaking your head. Yeah, that would be tough. Though that's not to say that students should never have to, right? Because again, being able to pick a group and being able to interact with people and engage with people is an important skill to have as an adult. Being able to go up to somebody and say, hey, I'm Paul. This is what I do. This is what I'm here for. These are all skills that need to be developed. But I think that there are teachers out there who are finding a good balance between putting kids on the spot and terrorizing them and traumatizing them. And then also making sure nobody's feeling like the spotlight's on them if they don't want it.
Sure. And so just another thought that kind of ran into my head here, and I haven't been in school in a long time, but I mean, some kids are mean, so like, I'm not, like you were saying, like there are bullies out there, and like, I mean,
yeah,
I can like
the bullying for sure can lead to people developing more issues related to anxiety or social anxiety.
But I mean, like, even like when you're talking about this popcorn reading, like, and I was probably one of these kids. If someone messed up, that's hilarious, like, and that's, I mean, but that happens everywhere. So it's part of the trick then, knowing like, yeah, maybe you will mess up and people are going to laugh, but like that's just happens.
When I was talking about like that graduated ladder, you go from small to big, that's on the big end, right? The person outwardly ridiculing you, because that's the greatest fear of anxiety, is that people are going to ridicule you. So yeah, I think in some respects it's probably useful to be able to develop a thick skin, because the world will have jerks in it. The world will have people who can criticize you. But in terms of like, let's just allow this behavior right now because it's probably good for them in the long run. Probably not. One of the things that I've seen schools do too is stuff related to anti-bullying. And the best anti-bullying curricula, the best anti-bullying programs aren't programs that say, don't bully, don't be a jerk. They're programs that say, here's how we can make kids feel welcome. You're going to get a lot more groundwork if you teach kids how to be kind, teach kids how to be open, teach kids how to be accepting and respectful of each other than you are telling them not to be jerks. To
stop a behavior. It's
exactly.
Easier to encourage a behavior than to stop one.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Hey, and look at that. Hey, that keys in well with this anxiety stuff too, because again, we're not stopping behaviors, we're replacing behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Man, Paul, this has just been, thank you. I have one last question for you then.
What's up?
What's in your car right now?
What's in my car right now?
Yeah.
In the trunk of my car, I have, I think 4 of those big IKEA tarp bags that I use for my groceries. I've also got an insulated bag that I use for my cold groceries. I do a lot of grocery shopping, and in true fashion of maybe who I am, I prefer to take as few trips from the car to the house as possible. And those IKEA bags can hold a lot of food. So I can minimize my footwork if I load them up to be 600 pounds. And then I think also, admittedly, behind the driver's seat, I do have a significant amount of garbage that I do need to bag up and throw away.
I'll come help you with it right now. Since you've done me such a favor being on this podcast, Paul Workman, it has been really nice to talk to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a good time.
Okay, have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Man, I could have talked to Paul all day. What a wonderful amount of information. Thank you, Paul. Paul Workman is a behavioral health therapist in Minong, Wisconsin. If you'd like to learn more about NorthLakes Community Clinic's school-based behavioral health program, visit our website at nlccwi.org. There will also be a link in the episode notes. NorthLakes Community Clinic is a community health center with clinics located throughout the northern third of Wisconsin. Our vision is healthy, prosperous, engaged communities where everyone thrives. My name is Jeremy Oswald, and I'm a marketing and communications specialist at NorthLakes. Give the NorthLakes podcast a review on whichever platform you are enjoying this on. It helps other people find the show. We'll be adding new episodes monthly, so keep your eyes open, and thank you for listening.